start with Victoria and the attempt by Premier Daniel Andrews to take on even more extraordinary powers than he already has for longer. He's recalling Parliament, which would be a good thing, except the reason he's recalling it is to attempt to extend the state of emergency provisions for another year. And he'll be looking also to extend the state of disaster provisions, which allow a Minister of the Crown to basically suspend an Act of Parliament. This is extraordinary, it's unprecedented in this country and unnecessary. Joining me tonight to discuss this and explain what's going on in Victoria is Chris Merritt. Chris is the former Legal Affairs Editor of The Australian and now, I'm delighted to say, a Research Fellow at the Menzies Research Centre. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Nick. Glad to be here.
Chris, what actually do these powers allow Daniel Andrews to do? Both the state of emergency, which he's going to extend for another year, and the state of disaster, which he's likely to extend as far as he can.
Almost anything is the short answer, Nick. The laws can be suspended, private property can be entered, people can be ordered to do things and not do things. It destroys, at least hopefully temporarily, fundamental rights that have been built up over centuries, really. It's very disturbing and it's happening in a state that prides itself on its Charter of Rights. To my mind, it just shows just how ineffective that Charter of Rights is. It's just window dressing. When push comes to shove, a government, any government, can abrogate fundamental rights that Australians everywhere thought were a right of citizenship.
It's extraordinary how far these go, right? So under the state of emergency legislation, then basically the police can, on the authority of the Chief Medical Officer, the police can come into your home without a warrant. They can take anything they want. They can destroy anything they want. They can take anything they want away with them. They can order you to go into your house, order you to come out, order you to leave and go to another place. It is just extraordinary, and all this without a warrant, without having to go to a court.
Yeah, look, by the courts in our system, the courts really are the bulwark against the invasion of liberty. You can forget about charters of rights. Bypassing the courts is a thing that is of absolutely critical importance in this. The courts are an independent check on the power of the executive arm of government and its agents, like police. The really worrying thing about this is the virus could be a medium-term problem for society. If this is how we're going to conduct ourselves in the medium term, I think we've got very serious problems. We need to adjust to the new reality, and adjustment does not mean throwing away rights and liberties that should be protected. It's also worrying that there's been a deafening silence by all sorts of publicly funded centres, legal centres that are supposed to be right. Really do need to engage in a period of introspection and just see exactly why they're there and what their purpose is.
Well, I think that's a very pertinent point, Chris. I mean, they will shout from the rooftops if they think there is, cultural discrimination or gender discrimination or anything like that. But on a fundamental thing like whether the police can go into your home, or whether Parliament, whether it is permissible for a minister of the government to declare an Act of Parliament basically null and void in suspension, they seem completely silent. It really does show up their agenda, I think.
Yeah, look, it also shows if this is legitimate under a statute that's been passed in Victoria, it raises serious doubts about the wisdom of Parliament in handing this enormous power, the power to abrogate laws, to the executive branch of government. I mean, that's ludicrous. It's completely ludicrous.
Yeah, because of the wording of the legislation, I think they can do it. They can do basically anything that, in their view, achieves the goal, achieves the the public health goal. But that could be, you know, they could extend that definition as far as they want, couldn't they? I mean, if they wanted to.
Yeah, look, a state of emergency, no one would expect the state of emergency to be in place for a period of months, let alone a year or so. It's just beyond what Parliament, if this is a legitimate exercise of authority vested in the government by Parliament, I feel sure that this is not the sort of way Parliament expected the law to be exercised. There should have been time limits put on this. If there are not already time limits, this exercise shows that there's a clear need to amend that legislation to provide some form of check on the executive. If the courts are going to be bypassed, the onus falls to Parliament. Parliament needs to have a look at this and do something about it. This is completely out of step with the way society is supposed to be governed.
Chris, before we let you go, there's also the contentious issue of border closures, and a considerable body of wisdom says that it's unconstitutional to close your borders as the states have been doing. Do you have a view on that?
I think they can be unconstitutional. I think the way they're applied is very worrying. I think if you turn up at a border and you can show that you don't have the bug, I think that a border closure to those sort of people is unconstitutional. Section 92 of the Constitution guarantees that you can move freely within the country. There's an exception for health, and it's a health exception. It's not a place of residence exception. So closing the border to people based on where they happen to live, I think is too far. It goes too far, and I think it's very vulnerable to challenge. And the sooner someone gets before the High Court and runs that argument, the sooner we'll start to deal with things based on the rules that have been in place since 1901.
Thank you, Chris, for joining us, and we'll be coming back to you, no doubt, pretty soon in this crisis where I think what's happening on the legal and civic front is so crucial.
Right, okay, Nick.